Zephyr was a planet unlike any other in the galaxy. It was a world that had been untouched for centuries, abandoned by every species that had ever attempted to settle it. Once, it had been considered a promising planet, but time had shown it to be an uninhabitable nightmare. The atmosphere was thick with poisonous gases, and the weather was unpredictable, ranging from extreme heat to freezing cold within hours. The soil was barren, and the oceans, if they could even be called that, were filled with deadly chemicals. For most civilizations in the galaxy, Zephyr was a place to be avoided. It was a planet that had swallowed fleets whole and wiped out entire expeditions. And yet, despite its lethal reputation, there were those who dared to try and claim it. The Vrokians were one such species, an ambitious race with advanced technology and a fierce desire to expand their empire. The Vrokians had heard rumors of the resources buried deep within Zephyr's core. Precious metals, rare crystals, and untapped energy sources that could fuel their war machines for centuries. It was a tempting prize, one that even the harsh conditions of Zephyr couldn't deter them from seeking. But despite their cutting-edge technology, the Vrokians were no match for the planet's deadly wrath. Their fleet entered Zephyr's atmosphere with a grand sense of anticipation. The massive warships were sleek and powerful, their hulls reinforced with alien alloys that could withstand intense heat and pressure. The Vrokians believed they had perfected the art of space travel and had already conquered countless worlds, so Zephyr was simply another conquest on their list. Little did they know that they were about to face a challenge unlike anything they had encountered before. As the first ships descended through the turbulent skies, the planet began to reveal its true nature. The clouds, dark and swirling like an angry beast, released torrents of acid rain that pelted the ships. The Vrokian fleet's shields flickered under the assault, but they held for now. Still, the atmosphere was a constant threat, one that the Vrokians were too confident to take seriously. The Vrokian general, Lord Kale, stood at the helm of the largest warship, the Inferno, watching the planet below through the viewport. His pale blue skin, a sign of his race's high status, seemed almost luminous in the dark lighting of the command center. His sharp features and calculating eyes never wavered from the planet below. He had seen many worlds fall before his forces, but Zephyr was different. The Inferno's sensors suddenly picked up something strange, an energy signature that seemed to pulse with incredible intensity, unlike anything they had encountered before. It was as if the planet itself was alive, responding to their presence. Lord Kel's confidence began to waver as he tried to understand the readings. He ordered the fleet to proceed with caution, but it was already too late. Out of nowhere, the skies split open with a deafening roar. Hundreds of small, but heavily armed ships appeared from behind the planet's thick clouds. The Vrokians had been expecting the planet's weather to be a challenge, but they hadn't prepared for the true danger, the humans. The human fleet, hidden beneath Zephyr's volatile clouds, had been waiting for this moment. For weeks, they had studied the planet's behavior, analyzing every atmospheric shift and monitoring the faintest energy pulses. They knew Zephyr was a death world, a place where even the most advanced species struggled to survive. But they also knew something else. Humans thrived in the face of adversity. As the first Vrokian warship neared the surface, its shields began to fail. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure as the acidic rain ate away at the metal. Inside, panic began to spread. The Vrokian crew scrambled to maintain control of their vessel, but the more they fought against the environment, the more the planet seemed to fight back. Suddenly, a barrage of laser fire streaked across the sky. The Vrokians turned their attention to the source, but it was too late. The first of the human ships had locked onto them with pinpoint accuracy. The lasers hit their target with devastating force, and the Vrokian ship exploded in a violent burst of light, sending debris scattering through the atmosphere. Lord Kel's heart raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Their technology wasn't supposed to be advanced enough to survive Zephyr's lethal conditions. And yet, here they were, showing no fear, no hesitation. The human fleet was unlike anything Lord Keld had ever seen. Each ship was a fortress, its hull reinforced with materials unknown to the Vrokians. The humans seemed to thrive in the acidic atmosphere, their advanced suits and shields protecting them from the planet's wrath. The Vrokian fleet, already weakened by the planet's hostile environment, found itself utterly unprepared for the onslaught. The human ships weren't just surviving. They were attacking with precision. Lord Keld's flagship, the Inferno, came under heavy fire, its shields buckling under the intense assault. The Vrokian crew fought desperately to keep their ship intact, but it was clear they were no match for the humans. "What is this?" Lord Keld whispered to himself in disbelief. He watched as human soldiers aboard their ships deployed advanced drones and robotic units to attack the Vrokian vessels. The humans fought not just with superior technology, but with a relentless determination that the Vrokians couldn't comprehend. On the surface, the Vrokian forces had begun their assault, attempting to establish a foothold on Zephyr. But the planet was not done with them yet. The ground shook as massive tremors rattled the battlefield. From the depths of the planet's crust, enormous creatures began to emerge, beasts with thick, armored skin and claws that could tear through metal. The Vrokians were not prepared for this. Their weapons, designed for space combat, were useless against Zephyr's savage fauna. The humans, however, had prepared for every possible contingency. As the massive beasts charged toward them, human soldiers, wearing advanced exosuits, fought back with ferocity and skill. The Vrokian soldiers, already outmatched by the planet's dangers, began to retreat, their morale shattered by the overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, in the skies above, Captain Rylan, the leader of the human fleet, was taking control of the battle. His sharp eyes scanned the chaos unfolding below. He knew that this was only the beginning. The Vrokians had underestimated the planet, but they had also underestimated humanity. "Initiate Phase 2, Captain Rylan commanded, his voice steady and confident. The human fleet's advanced drones descended, launching EMP blasts that disabled the Vrokian ships one by one. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about strategy. The humans had studied their enemies, and they knew exactly where to strike. With every attack, the Vrokians grew more desperate, their forces crumbling under the relentless assault from both the planet and the humans. Lord Keld clenched his fists in frustration. His once proud fleet was falling apart, and his forces on the ground were being overwhelmed. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. He had heard of humanity, of course, but the stories always seemed exaggerated, nothing more than myths and legends. Now, standing on the brink of defeat, he realized the truth. Humans were not just another species. They were something else entirely. As the final Vrokian warship exploded in a fiery blaze, Lord Keld watched in stunned silence. The humans had done the impossible. They had conquered a death world, and they had done it faster and more efficiently than he could have ever imagined. The Vrokian forces had been scattered, their pride broken. In the distance, the remaining human ships began to regroup, their dark silhouettes cutting through the swirling clouds like predators stalking their prey. It was clear that the humans weren't here just to survive. They were here to win. And as the Vrokians retreated into the shadows, they knew one thing for certain. Zephyr had never been so dangerous, not because of its deadly weather or monstrous creatures, but because the humans had arrived. Zephyr was a world that never rested. From the moment a person set foot on its surface, they were greeted with a harsh, unforgiving environment. For the Vrokians, it had been a planet that seemed to punish them for every mistake they made, and for the humans, it was no different. But what set humans apart from the other species that had come before them was their unwavering will to survive. The ground beneath their boots cracked and shifted as they made their way across the planet's barren landscape. Thick, gray clouds hung low in the sky, blocking out the sun and casting everything in a dull, eerie light. The air was thick with a toxic haze, and each breath felt like a battle for survival. The temperature fluctuated wildly, sometimes soaring to unbearable heat, then dropping to a bone-chilling cold. But the humans, led by Captain Rylan, were unfazed. Despite the planet's hostile atmosphere, the humans moved with purpose, their advanced technology allowing them to endure what would have been impossible for most. They wore suits designed to protect them from the toxic air, each one lined with advanced filters and heat regulators. Their helmets, fitted with high-tech visors, allowed them to see through the haze, while their boots had been specially crafted to withstand the constant tremors that shook the ground. "Stay sharp," Captain Ryland called to his team, his voice steady over the comms. Zephyr's full of surprises, and we're not alone out here. The soldiers moved in tight formation, their weapons ready. They knew the planet had more to offer than just poisonous air and deadly weather. There were creatures here, monstrous beings that lived in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And strike they did. A loud roar echoed through the air, vibrating the very ground beneath them. Before they could react, the earth exploded upward, sending rocks and dirt flying in all directions. From the newly formed crater, a massive creature emerged. Its body was covered in thick, scaly armor, and its claws were long enough to slice through steel. Its eyes glowed with a fiery, menacing light, and its mouth was lined with rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The creature let out another deafening roar, charging toward the humans with incredible speed. Captain Ryland didn't hesitate for a second. He raised his weapon and fired, sending a burst of plasma energy straight into the creature's chest. But the shot did little more than singe the beast's scales. The creature howled in pain but continued its relentless charge. "Fall back," Captain Ryland ordered, covering fire. The humans opened fire, their weapons firing in unison. But the creature was relentless. It swiped at them with its claws, forcing the soldiers to dodge and retreat. Despite their advanced technology and powerful weapons, they were struggling to make a dent in the creature's tough hide. This was no ordinary beast. It was an apex predator, perfectly adapted to Zephyr's deadly environment. "Focus on its eyes," Captain Ryland shouted. "Take out its vision." The soldiers aimed at the creature's glowing eyes, knowing that if they could blind it, they might have a chance to defeat it. One soldier, a sharpshooter named Lieutenant Nova, took the shot. Her plasma rifle cracked, and the beam of light hit the creature squarely in its right eye. The beast shrieked in pain, thrashing wildly as it tried to shake off the attack. It roared again, more enraged than ever, and charged at Nova, determined to rip her apart. Before it could reach her, another soldier, Corporal Jax, lunged forward, throwing a grenade at the creature's feet. The explosion sent the beast flying backward, and for a moment, it seemed stunned. "Now's our chance," Captain Ryland yelled. The humans didn't hesitate. They pressed forward, their weapons firing in perfect coordination. With each shot, they chipped away at the creature's armor until, finally, it collapsed in a heap, defeated. Breathing heavily, Captain Ryland surveyed the scene. "That was too close. But we're not done yet. Zephyr's not going to make it easy for us." The humans knew that this victory was just the beginning. They had barely scratched the surface of the dangers lurking on Zephyr. As the last of the creature's body lay still, Captain Ryland turned to his team. "Let's move," he said. "We've got more ground to cover." The group continued their journey across the planet, knowing that they had to push forward if they wanted to survive. They couldn't afford to rest, not when they knew that other threats were waiting just beyond the horizon. Every step they took was a gamble. With each new turn, the planet revealed more of its deadly secrets. In the distance, they saw a massive canyon stretching as far as the eye could see. The sides of the canyon were lined with jagged rocks, and the ground was cracked and uneven. It was a dangerous place to navigate, but they had no choice but to cross it. As they descended into the canyon, a strange noise filled the air. An eerie, high-pitched whistling sound that seemed to come from all directions. The humans paused, instinctively reaching for their weapons. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The whistling sound grew louder, almost deafening, as the ground cracked open in front of them. From the depths of the canyon, something enormous began to rise. It was a creature unlike any they had seen before, a towering, multi-limbed beast with scales that shimmered in the dim light. Its limbs were covered in spiked armor, and its head was crowned with sharp, twisting horns. The creature screeched, its voice stiffening as it emerged from the canyon floor. It was huge, easily 10 times the size of the beast they had fought earlier. Its glowing eyes locked onto the humans, and for a moment, they could feel the weight of its gaze. It was a predator, and they were its prey. Captain Ryland didn't hesitate. He motioned for his team to take cover behind the canyon walls as the creature began to charge. The ground shook with each step it took, and the air became thick with dust. The humans opened fire once again, but this time, the creature didn't retreat. Instead, it unleashed a blast of energy from its mouth, sending a shockwave through the canyon that knocked several soldiers off their feet. "Get back," Captain Ryland shouted. "It's got energy blasts." The soldiers scrambled to reposition themselves as the creature advanced. It was clear that this battle would be even harder than the last. The humans needed to think fast if they were going to survive. "Nova, take out its energy core," Captain Ryland ordered. "Jax, keep it distracted." Nova nodded, her eyes narrowing in focus. She knew what needed to be done. She had the perfect weapon for the job, a long-range plasma cannon that could target specific energy sources. She took aim and fired, the shot slicing through the air and hitting the creature's chest. The blast struck true, causing the creature to stagger, but it didn't go down. It roared in fury and turned to face Nova. But the humans were ready. Jax ran forward, firing his weapon and drawing the creature's attention away from Nova. The others opened fire as well, hitting the creature with everything they had. Slowly, but surely, the creature's energy shield began to weaken. Finally, with a well-placed shot, Nova hit the creature's energy core. The beast let out one final deafening scream as it collapsed to the ground in a heap of sparks and smoke. "Good work, team," Captain Ryland said, panting with exhaustion. "But we can't stay here long. Zypher's not done with us yet." With the massive creature defeated, the humans pressed on. They had proven that they could survive in this dangerous world, but there was still so much more they had yet to face. The dangers of Zyphar were endless, and each victory felt like a small step forward in a much larger battle. As they ventured deeper into the planet's heart, they knew that they were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their future. Zyphar had been a planet of death, but now, with the humans here, it had become a battleground, a place where only the strongest would endure. And Captain Ryland and his team were ready to face whatever came next. The sun, if it could be called that, hung weakly in the sky. It was a pale, distant orb that gave off little warmth or light. The planet of Zyphar had no mercy. It was a world of chaos and brutality, where the weak could not survive for long. And yet, here they were, humans, fighting to live, to push forward in a world that seemed designed to kill them. Captain Ryland stood at the edge of a rocky cliff, his eyes scanning the horizon. His team was scattered behind him, making their way cautiously through the rough terrain. They had been through so much already, and yet they knew the worst was still ahead. The creatures, the terrain, the toxic air, all of it was a constant threat. But it wasn't the planet itself that worried him the most. It was the unknown. "Keep moving," Ryland called out to his team. His voice was firm, steady. He didn't let fear show, though inside, he was just as concerned as the others. They had encountered 2 massive creatures so far, and there were likely more waiting for them. The ground shook every now and then, as if the planet itself was alive, angry that they had dared to set foot on it. They were near the heart of Zyphar now, where the most dangerous creatures lived. Ryland had heard stories from other explorers about the legends of the death beasts, beasts that were said to be unstoppable. Ryland wasn't the kind of man to believe in legends, but after what he'd seen on this planet, he knew one thing for certain. If such creatures existed, they would have to be defeated, or humanity would never survive here. As they moved deeper into the heart of the planet, the temperature began to drop. The air felt thick and heavy, and every breath was a struggle. Even with their advanced suits and filters, the humans felt the strain. The cold was like a weight pressing down on their shoulders, making each step harder than the last. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them began to tremble. It started as a subtle vibration, but within seconds, it was shaking violently. The soldiers braced themselves, looking around for any sign of danger. Ryland's instincts kicked in. He quickly signaled for his team to take cover behind the nearest rocks. "Get down," he shouted. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a massive explosion rocked the ground. The force sent rocks flying, and the soldiers were thrown off their feet. Ryland was knocked to the ground, but he quickly scrambled to his feet, drawing his weapon. His team followed suit, regaining their positions and scanning the area for any sign of attack. A loud guttural roar echoed through the air. It was the sound of something monstrous, something primal. The soldiers tensed. They were no strangers to danger, but this felt different. The air was charged with a terrible energy, and every instinct they had screamed at them to run. But they didn't. "Stay focused," Captain Ryland ordered. "Eyes open. We're not backing down now." They moved into formation, weapons raised, every sense on high alert. Then, from the mist and darkness ahead, something emerged. It was massive, easily twice the size of the creature they had fought earlier. Its body was covered in jagged, obsidian-like armor, and its eyes glowed an eerie red. It was a predator, intelligent, relentless, and deadly. The Death Beast. Ryland's heart raced. The stories had been true. There it was, standing before them, its massive frame towering over the rocks. It looked like something out of a nightmare, its fangs long and sharp, its claws capable of rending metal like paper. Without hesitation, the creature charged, its powerful legs propelling it forward with frightening speed. Ryland barely had time to react. He raised his rifle, firing a burst of energy directly at the creature's face. The shot struck the beast's eye, but it didn't stop. It let out a deafening roar, enraged, and continued its relentless assault. "Move," Ryland shouted, as the creature barreled toward them. The team scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and boulders. The death beast was quick, and its speed made it hard to track. Ryland fired again, his shots hitting the creature's armored hide but doing little to stop it. The beast was like a tank, unmovable, unstoppable. "Nova, Jax, aim for the legs," Ryland ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Nova, the team's sharpshooter, took a steady aim and fired, hitting the creature in the leg. The blast caused the beast to stumble, but it quickly recovered, swiping its massive claws across the ground and sending rocks flying. Jax, another soldier, jumped out of cover and fired his plasma rifle, hitting the creature in the chest. It howled in pain but kept coming. Ryland knew that they couldn't take this thing down with sheer firepower. They needed a plan, a strategy. "Fall back," he yelled. "We're leading it toward the ravine. We'll have the high ground there." The soldiers quickly followed their captain's command, retreating toward a narrow ravine that cut through the rocky landscape. The death beast, furious and relentless, followed them. The sound of its pounding feet grew louder, the air vibrating with each step. As they reached the ravine, Ryland motioned for his team to take positions on the high ground. They were preparing for their final stand. The death beast would be forced to climb the narrow path, making it vulnerable to their attacks. "This is it," Ryland muttered under his breath. The creature reached the entrance to the ravine, its massive body squeezing into the narrow path. It howled in frustration, its glowing eyes locked onto the humans. It was more enraged than ever, and it began to climb, its claws digging into the rocks as it ascended. "Now," Ryland ordered. Nova fired first, hitting the creature in the shoulder. The blast rocked the beast, forcing it to lose its footing. The creature roared, stumbling back, but it quickly recovered. Jax fired next, hitting the creature in the side. The beast roared again, this time staggering and teetering dangerously on the edge. Rylan aimed his rifle, focusing on the beast's head. He needed one clean shot. With steady hands, he fired, hitting the creature squarely in the skull. The impact sent shockwaves through its body. The death beast faltered, its red eyes dimming. It let out one final scream before collapsing to the ground with a deafening crash. The ground shook with the force of its fall, and the soldiers held their breath, waiting for any sign that it was still alive. But there was nothing. The death beast was dead. Rylan let out a long sigh of relief. His heart was racing, but they had done it. They had survived. For now. "Good work, team," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But don't get comfortable. This is only the beginning." The team gathered around their fallen enemy, their weapons still raised, eyes scanning the surroundings. The battle was over, but the war for survival on Zifar had just begun. The planet was full of dangers, and this victory, while significant, was just a small part of the bigger picture. "We keep moving," Captain Ryland said, his gaze steady and determined. "We didn't come here to die. We came here to survive." The soldiers nodded, knowing that the hardest challenges lay ahead. Zifar was a planet that offered no mercy, but humanity had something the beasts of Zifar didn't: determination. The fight for survival was far from over. They had to keep moving, keep fighting. The planet had shown them its deadliest creatures, but they had shown Zifar that humans were a force to be reckoned with. The battle for survival had only just begun. The victory over the Death Beast had given the team a brief moment of respite, but they knew it wouldn't last long. The planet Zifar was a living, breathing nightmare, and it had just been angered. Captain Ryland could feel it in his bones, the calm before the storm. He knew Zifar wouldn't let them leave that easily. The landscape around them had changed since their victory. The ground, once stable, was now shifting beneath their feet, as if the very planet itself was alive and reacting to their presence. The air had grown thicker, more oppressive, and the sky had turned a deep shade of purple, casting an eerie light over the barren land. It felt like something was watching them, waiting. Ryland signaled for his team to keep moving. They had to stay on the move, even if the planet seemed determined to make their lives as difficult as possible. "Stay alert," Ryland said, his voice low. "We're not out of danger yet." Nova, the sharpshooter, was always the first to notice things that others missed. She was scanning the horizon, her rifle ready, when she stopped and raised a hand, signaling for the team to halt. "What is it?" Rylan asked, his voice sharp with concern. "There's something different," Nova said, her voice tense. "The ground, it's moving. Like there's something underneath us." Rylan looked down, his eyes narrowing. At first, he thought it was just the aftershocks of the battle, but as he focused, he saw the dirt and rocks shifting, rising in strange patterns. It was as if the planet itself was alive and stirring beneath their feet. "Get back," Rylan shouted, but it was too late. The ground erupted with a deafening roar, and from the depths of the planet, massive tendrils shot up, thick and covered in barred spines. They twisted and turned, reaching for the sky like the limbs of some colossal, nightmarish creature. The team scrambled to avoid the deadly tendrils, but the ground was shaking so violently that they could barely keep their footing. "Move, now," Rylan yelled, grabbing Nova by the arm and pulling her toward safety. The tendrils swiped through the air with terrifying speed, slamming into the rocks and sending debris flying. The team scattered in all directions, trying to avoid the deadly appendages that seemed to come from everywhere. Jax, the heavy weapons specialist, fired his plasma cannon at one of the tendrils, the blast sending a shower of sparks and smoke into the air. The tendril recoiled, but only for a moment before it lashed out again. It was clear that the planet was fighting back with everything it had. "This is insane," Jax shouted, firing again. It's like the whole planet is alive. Ryland's heart raced. He had seen hostile environments before, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just the creatures. They weren't even the biggest threat anymore. It was the planet itself. Sci-Fi was fighting them, and it was doing so with a savagery that they had never imagined. We need to get to higher ground, Ryland ordered. There's no time to waste. The team sprinted toward a nearby hill, their boots pounding against the ground as the tendrils continued to strike all around them. Every step felt like an eternity as they made their way to the top of the hill, the earth shaking beneath their feet. They could hear the roar of the tendrils, the sound of them ripping through the landscape, seeking out any sign of life to destroy. When they reached the top, they paused for a moment to catch their breath, their eyes scanning the area. The tendrils were still thrashing around below, and the ground was still shaking. Ryland could feel the tension in the air, like the planet was holding its breath, waiting for them to make the next move. "Where do we go now?" Nova asked, her voice tight with worry. Ryland looked around, searching for any signs of safety. They needed shelter, a place where they could regroup and plan their next move. But the planet seemed to be closing in on them, making escape impossible. The once vast and open land now felt like a trap, with nowhere to hide from the fury of Zephyr. "We're going to have to take a chance," Ryland said, determination in his voice. "There's a cave system to the east. It's our best shot." Without waiting for a response, he started moving toward the east, leading his team through the chaos. They had no choice. The cave system might offer shelter, but they couldn't afford to waste any time. Every moment they spent in the open increased the chance of another deadly attack from the planet's shifting surface. As they ran, Ryland kept an eye on the horizon, his mind racing. The planet was changing. It wasn't just the tendrils. They had been part of Zephy's ecosystem, a threat to be expected. What was different now was the sheer scale of the planet's anger. This wasn't just a hostile world. It was a world that seemed to actively reject their presence. Every step they took felt like they were treading on fragile ground, as if the planet could swallow them whole at any moment. The air grew colder as they moved, the wind picking up, howling like a beast in the distance. It seemed like the very atmosphere of Zephyr was conspiring against them. As they neared the cave entrance, the ground beneath them trembled once more. The sound of rocks cracking and shifting filled the air, and Ryland's heart sank. The cave, this supposed sanctuary, might not be safe for long. Zephyr was relentless, and it seemed to have endless ways of attacking. "We're almost there," Ryland said, trying to sound confident, even though doubt gnawed at him. "Just a little farther." Suddenly, the earth gave way beneath them. A large section of the ground cracked open, and the team fell into the chasm below. Ryland tried to grab onto something, anything, but the rocks were too loose, and they were falling too fast. They crashed into the deep pit, landing hard on the rocky surface below. For a moment, everything was chaos. Dust and debris filled the air, and the team was disoriented, struggling to regain their bearings. Ryland pushed himself up, his body aching from the fall. He could hear the sounds of his team groaning and cursing, but they were alive. That was the important thing. "Everyone all right?" he called out. "I think so," Nova replied, her voice strained. "Just a bit shaken." Jax groaned. That was one hell of a ride. Ryland quickly scanned the area, trying to assess their situation. The cave entrance was now above them, a dark void that was nearly impossible to reach. They were trapped, and there was no telling how much longer Zephyr would let them survive. "We need to find another way out," Ryland said, his voice firm. "This planet is out for blood, and it won't stop until it gets us." They began moving deeper into the cave system, unsure of what lay ahead. The air was colder now, and the darkness felt suffocating. Every sound echoed eerily in the tight tunnels, making it feel as if the planet itself was closing in on them, suffocating them. It was clear now that Ziffer was not just a hostile world. It was a world with a mind of its own. A planet that fought back, that rejected anything that didn't belong. And they were intruders. The team had survived so far, but Rylan knew one thing for certain. The true battle was only just beginning. The cave system had provided them with some temporary safety, but Rylan and his team knew it wouldn't be enough. The planet Zyphar was unlike anything they had ever faced before. The way it reacted to their presence, as if it were a living entity, made every moment feel like a struggle for survival. The air was heavy, thick with tension, and the sound of distant rumbling reminded them that Zyphar was far from finished with them. As the team regrouped in the cold, dark cave, Rylan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had survived so far, but it was clear that the planet was not going to stop hunting them. They had to find a way out, and fast. "We can't stay here," Nova said, breaking the silence. Her voice echoed in the dark cavern. "This cave might be safe for now, but we don't know how long that will last. We need to get back to the surface and find a way off this planet." Rylan nodded, but the reality of their situation was hard to ignore. The surface was no longer a safe option. Every step they took on Zyphar seemed to trigger a new wave of danger. The tendrils had already tried to kill them once, and they knew the planet was capable of worse. "We need to think," Rylan said, pacing slowly. His mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan. He couldn't afford to let his team lose hope. They had come too far, and they weren't about to let Zyphar claim them now. The flickering light from their helmets illuminated the walls of the cave, which were covered in strange, glowing symbols. The symbols looked almost alien, like something out of a forgotten language. Rylan couldn't make sense of them, but they felt important. They had to be. "Look at this," Jax said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and curiosity. He was pointing at the symbols on the wall. "These aren't just markings. There's something else." Rylan approached, studying the glowing symbols closely. They were intricate, almost like a map. A map of the planet, or perhaps the cave system itself. They might lead them to something important, something that could help them escape. "This could be our way out," Rylan said, his voice filled with determination. "If we follow these symbols, they might lead us to a safe place, or at least give us some answers." Nova squinted at the symbols, her sharp eyes scanning them carefully. "It's worth a shot. Better than sitting here and waiting for Zyphar to finish us off." With no other choice, the team decided to follow the glowing symbols. The cave system was winding and narrow, and the air grew colder the deeper they went. The walls of the cave were lined with strange crystalline structures that shimmered faintly in the light of their helmets. The further they went, the more the symbols seemed to come alive, glowing brighter and pulsing with an otherworldly energy. "We're getting closer," Jax said, his voice filled with awe. "I can feel it." Rylan's pulse quickened. He knew they were close to something important. The map they were following seemed to be guiding them, but where would it lead? What was waiting for them at the end of this strange journey? After what felt like hours of winding through the cave, they finally arrived at a large open chamber. In the center of the room stood a massive stone structure, covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen along the way. The air in the chamber was thick with energy, and Rylan could feel it vibrating beneath his feet. "This is it," Rylan said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and caution. "Whatever this is, it's the key to getting us out of here." As the team approached the structure, they noticed that it wasn't just a solid rock formation. There was a large, circular opening in the center, and as they stepped closer, a soft hum filled the air. It was like the structure was waking up, responding to their presence. "What is this place?" Nova whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I don't know," Rylan replied, his mind racing. "But it feels like it's connected to the planet. It's like the heart of Zyphar." Without thinking, Rylan stepped forward and placed his hand on the structure. The moment his hand made contact, the entire chamber seemed to come alive. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed with light, and the ground beneath them trembled. The structure in front of them began to shift, slowly moving, as if it were a living entity. "Get back," Jax shouted, pulling Nova away from the structure. But Rylan remained where he was, unable to move. The structure was calling to him, its energy pulling him in. He didn't know why, but he felt an unexplainable connection to it. The air was electric, and the planet's anger seemed to fade for a brief moment. Then, without warning, a bright light erupted from the structure, blinding them all. For a few seconds, they were engulfed in the light, unable to see or hear anything. But just as quickly as it came, the light faded, leaving them in stunned silence. Rylan blinked, trying to adjust to the dim lighting once more. His mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. The structure had activated, but what did that mean? Had they triggered something that would help them escape, or had they just made things worse? Before he could answer his own question, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the chamber. It was not coming from any of them, but from the planet itself. The voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it felt as though it was reverberating through their very souls. "Who dares disturb the sacred ground of Zephyr?" the voice asked, its tone filled with ancient power. Rylan's heart raced. What is this?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "I am the spirit of Zephyr," the voice continued. "I have watched over this planet for millennia, guarding its secrets, its wrath. You have trespassed, but you have also proven your strength. You have survived where others have failed. And now, I offer you a choice." The team stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to say or do. This was no ordinary planet. They had known that much from the start. But now, they were faced with something far beyond their understanding. A voice from the planet itself, offering them a choice. What choice? Rylan asked, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "You may leave," the voice said, "or you may stay and unlock the full power of Zephyr. If you choose the latter, you will have the strength to control this planet. But be warned, the power comes at a cost." Rylan's mind raced. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The chance to escape Zephyr's deadly grip, or the chance to control it. The choice was monumental, and it would change everything. "What's the cost?" Nova asked, her voice filled with caution. "The cost is your soul," the voice whispered, its tone heavy with finality. "To control Zephyr, you must become one with it. The planet will consume you, and you will never be the same." Rylan stood still, trying to process the gravity of the situation. They could leave and return to their ship, but Zephyr had already proven that it would never let them go so easily. Or they could stay and take control, but at a price that could cost them everything. As he looked around at his team, Rylan could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They were all in this together, and the decision they made now would determine their fates. "We'll make the choice together," Rylan said, his voice filled with determination. "We came here as a team, and we'll leave as one. Let's decide what we want to do, but we do it together." In that moment, they knew they faced a decision that could change the course of their lives forever. But whatever they chose, one thing was certain. The adventure wasn't over yet. The planet Zephyr had offered them power, but at what cost? Only time would tell. The decision hung heavily over Rylan and his team. The voice of Zephyr had spoken, offering them a choice between life as they knew it, escaping the planet, or staying and wielding the planet's ancient power at an unknown cost. Rylan's heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the weight of this decision pressing down on him like never before. Around him, the team was silent. Each person had their thoughts, but no one spoke. The consequences of their next move could change everything, and none of them were willing to take the step without careful consideration. Rylan glanced at each of them, his eyes meeting Nova's, then Jax's, then Lyra's, and finally Orin's. He could see the same uncertainty reflected in their eyes, but also a flicker of determination. They were all survivors. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. She had always been the one to look for solutions in tough situations. Even now, in the face of the unknown, she didn't hesitate to ask the question that had been on everyone's mind. Ryland didn't have an immediate answer. His mind raced, considering everything they had been through on Zephyr. The planet was alive, in a sense, and it was clear that it held secrets beyond their comprehension. The power it promised was tempting. Who wouldn't want control over something as powerful as Zephyr? But at what cost? Could they afford to make that sacrifice? "The cost is steep," Ryland said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "To control this planet, we'd have to give up something. Something that might change who we are, or even make us something else entirely. We might gain unimaginable power, but we might also lose ourselves in the process." Jack stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "And what happens if we leave? Do we just forget everything that's happened here? Are we running from a planet that we barely understand?" Orin, the quietest of the group, spoke up next. "There's no easy answer here. If we leave, Zephyr could find a way to come after us. The power we could harness might protect us. But if we stay, the risk is even greater. We could lose everything." The tension in the room was palpable. Each person understood the gravity of the choice. They had all seen what Zephyr was capable of. The deadly creatures, the hostile terrain, the strange energy that seemed to pulse through the planet. But they had also seen something else. Their own resilience. They had fought through every obstacle, survived things no one else could, and come out stronger for it. Finally, Ryland took a deep breath and spoke again, his voice firm. "We've been through so much together. Whatever we decide, it has to be something we can all live with. I don't want any of us to lose ourselves, but we've come this far. We can't turn back now." Nova stepped closer, her voice steady. "I agree. We've seen Zephyr's power firsthand. But we've also seen our own strength. We survived everything it threw at us. If we stay, we need to do it because we believe we can handle whatever comes next. We need to believe in ourselves." Ryland nodded, his resolve strengthening. It wasn't just about the planet anymore. It was about them. Their survival, their legacy, and their future. Whatever they chose, they had earned it. They had proven they were more than just survivors. They were humans, and humans didn't back down from a challenge. "We can control Zephyr," Ryland said, his voice unwavering. "We're strong enough to handle it, and if it means we have to sacrifice something to gain that power, then we'll face it together. But we do it on our terms." With that, the team made their choice. They would stay on Zephyr, embracing the power it offered, but only if they could keep their humanity. They knew the risk, but they also knew they couldn't turn away from the opportunity to unlock the planet's secrets. The ground beneath them trembled again, and the glowing symbols on the structure flickered once more, as if acknowledging their decision. The voice of Zephyr returned, this time with a tone of approval. "You have chosen wisely," the voice said. "You have proven yourselves worthy. The power of Zephyr is yours to command. But remember, this power comes with responsibility. It will test you, challenge you, and change you. You must remain true to yourselves, or the planet will claim you as its own." Ryland felt a shiver run down his spine. The warning was clear, but it didn't deter him. They were ready. Together, they would harness the power of Zephyr and use it to protect their world, to protect each other, and to create a new future. "We're ready," Ryland said, his voice full of confidence. "We'll accept the challenge, and we'll do it our way." With those words, the ground beneath them shifted once more. The structure in front of them began to glow brighter, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. Ryland could feel the power of Zephyr coursing through him, like a living force, a current of energy that connected him to the planet itself. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. The team stood together, each one of them feeling the same pull. The planet was alive, and it was offering them a chance to become a part of it, to control it. But they knew that with this power came responsibility. They had to remain true to themselves, to their humanity, and to the bond they shared. Suddenly, the symbols on the walls of the cave seemed to shift, revealing a hidden passage. The air grew warmer, and the once cold cave began to feel like home. The energy from Zifar had transformed the space, making it feel more alive, more welcoming. It was as if the planet itself was offering them a way forward. "We've done it," Jack said, his voice filled with awe. Ryland smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of understanding. They had come a long way, and the journey was far from over. The power of Zifar was theirs to command, but they knew the challenges ahead would be even greater. They would have to use that power wisely, and they would have to face the planet's wrath when it inevitably tested them. Together, they moved forward into the newly revealed passage. As they walked, Ryland's thoughts turned to the legacy of humans. It wasn't just about surviving on a hostile planet. It was about adapting, overcoming, and growing. Humans had always been resilient. They had faced impossible odds, and time again, they had come out on top. They were not just survivors. They were builders, creators, and dreamers. Zifar had shown them the power of the planet, but it had also shown them something else, the strength that lay within themselves. They could control the planet, but it was their humanity that would guide them. That would always be their greatest power. As they continued their journey, Ryland felt a sense of pride swell within him. This wasn't just the legacy of the team. It was the legacy of all of humanity. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. And now they would use their new power to protect their world and ensure that the legacy of humanity would continue to shine across the stars. And so, the journey of Ryland and his team continued. Zifar had offered them a new beginning, a new future, but it was up to them to decide what that future would look like. Would they use their newfound power for good, or would they let the planet consume them, just as it had consumed others before them? Only time would tell. But for now, they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would leave their mark on Zifar and the universe beyond, showing the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their legacy would echo across the stars for generations to come.